high speed as well, change of direction. Just notice that on our timing screens it's flashed up turn 5 for Tom Sykes.
If it is turn 5, that's where we're going to see a repeat of what happened with Caricasulo, where the front just folded from underneath him. And again, for Caricasulo, there was a lot of damage done to his bike, just because once it clipped into the gravel trap, it barrel rolled, so it could have been the same situation for Sykes. He had just set a personal best through sector 1, so he had been on course for a fast lap time, so clearly Sykes just pushing a little bit too hard potentially in these conditions.
Tom Sykes has now been displaced down to 3rd position by Loris Baz, who goes P2, so becoming the latest rider to dip below the 150s, and Scott Redding has done so as well. So we've now got 3 riders within a second of Jonathan Rea, who's still pounding in the laps, and another good first sector from Jonathan Rea, a 10th of a second up as Tom Sykes trudges and now jogs away from the scene of the incident. We will see the run down to turn 5 for Tom Sykes.
Yeah, front's going to fold here for Tom, and nothing he can do about that. Typical what we see in the wet weather conditions, and for riders, they don't tend to do too much too differently whenever that happens compared to the other. You can see there for Tom just clearly just trying to tuck himself in as well as possible there, so that if he did try and roll through, that he'd be able to protect himself a little bit. Jonathan Rea running off as well, so clearly a lot of riders trying to push on now at this stage. That looks like it's down in towards the 180 corner for Jonathan, where he's gone off.
So Jonathan Rea rejoining the circuit then after an off-track escapade. Interesting to see Tom Sykes protecting himself as he went down there. It looked as though he was engaging in a bit of luge, the way he was sliding down towards the gravel trap on the exit of turn 5.
Yeah, you see certain riders do that to try and protect themselves. Albert Arenas in Moto 3, we see him do it a lot, where he really tucks himself in to try and make sure that he doesn't injure himself too badly, but it also means you don't have too much control whenever you end up spinning around like that. But for Jonathan Rea here, you can see he's very lucky to have stayed on that. That's down through the first of the chicanes, the Nürburgring chicane, there at turn 6 and 7. And for Jonathan, he was able to just about get it sorted. That's down at turn 15 for Scott Redding.
Wow, action-packed the final minutes of this free practice too. Redding's gone down at the start of the Lycée complex, and he will now rejoin. At least it's a short distance to pit lane. We're going to see it here, Steve.
Yeah, and you can see this is the run down. This could be very similar to what happened to Rinaldi in this morning session. Maybe just a little bit too much speed there for Scott Redding through there, and the front just folds from underneath them. That's a very typical crash that we see here in Magny-Cours, and for Scott, with only 2.5 minutes left in the session, that can actually be quite useful for him, because now he really does understand that that corner can bite you during the course of the races. It is one of those corners that's so easy for this to happen, because it's downhill on the entry, so it's easy to brake a little bit too late, carry a little bit too much speed in, and just fold that front. So for Scott Redding, that could be a really important lesson for the rest of the weekend, because you don't want to make that mistake during the races. Much better to make it now during these practice sessions.
That's 3 of our top 4 on the timesheet. It's all going, where's the limit, where's the limit? Found it, and unfortunately for 2 of them, it's ended in the gravel trap. Scott Redding makes his way back in and takes a seat in the Aruba IT Racing Ducati pit box, and Tom Sykes of the BMW Motorrad squad had already gone down at turn 5. Jonathan Rea, the only one who was able to save it, and that could have been pretty nasty coming off turn 7 for him.
Yeah, and for Jonathan, he's now got 2 red sectors in the first half of the lap, so he's on course to move himself even further in front of the rest of the field. Michael Ruben Rinaldi moving himself up and improving his time there to 5th fastest in this session. That's 5th fastest overall as well.
Outrageous, isn't it? Slow down and give everyone else a chance. 0.4 of a second clear is Jonathan Rea out in front. Michael van der Mark also on for a good lap here. Strong first sector from the Dutchman.
Yeah, for Van der Mark in that first sector, really strong on the Yamaha. Lost a bit of ground in sector 2. Jonathan Rea, half a second faster than him in sector 2.
So Michael van der Mark still in line to improve on what he has been able to do. Xavi Forés, the only rider in the entire group now of 21 riders who's not been able to improve in free practice 2 compared to what he did earlier on today. Although I wonder whether some of the riders pushing in the late stages of this free practice 2 is what has been their undoing. Eugene Laverty comes across the line. He moves 7th fastest now, 150.254. Michael Ruben Rinaldi also with a strong start to his latest lap. He's up at the halfway mark.
Yeah, and for Rinaldi at the halfway stage, up by a 10th of a second, trying to improve. This is Van der Mark at the end of his lap, where he'd been fast in sector 1, but losing ground as the lap goes on. Down into 15, this is where we saw Scott Redding of his crash. This is where we also just saw Loris Baz ran off as well. He was able to stay upright though. But for Van der Mark, comes across the line, 8th fastest, time for one more lap as well at the end of the session.
Yes, 10 seconds now until the checkered flag falls in this FP2. It's Rea who leads us by over half a second from Loris Baz. neither Ray nor Baz look like they're going to improve on their latest lap. They will see the checkered flag when they come across the line. Tom Sykes, of course, after his incident, and Scott Redding likewise are not going to be able to improve, so it's up to Rinaldi at this stage, and he is still up after 3 completed sectors here. Michael Ruben Rinaldi then heading towards the checkered flag with an opportunity to go top in FP2. He can't quite get there. 69 milliseconds short of Jonathan Ray is Michael Ruben Rinaldi. It's a 1:48.9 second rider to dip below the 1:49s, and that is a good effort from Michael Ruben Rinaldi on the 21 Ducati.